Well, since we have new people, and since we're starting a whole new year and we're starting a whole new play, we will begin with a review, which will probably not sound anything like the original. What this is a series of talks that we try to understand reality and that we try to live better in reality via mysticism. It will be mysticism in general, but primarily Western mysticism and primarily Rosicrucian Western mysticism. We're not going to talk tonight about what mysticism is because that would be way too long and way too out of the ballpark. But this is also a series of talks about some of the plays of Shakespeare. These are not talks that are talks about literature or about Shakespeare per se. Well, we will do a little bit of that. They are not talks about psychology or mythology or folklore or all of the things that Shakespeare covers, but there will be some of each of them. And it is because of those many things that we are using Shakespeare. If one tries to address all of reality in large and in small, it's not an easy matter at all. The universal spirit is in everything, and everything is in it. And there is nowhere that spirit isn't. So to try to address that is not an easy matter. But if you use the Shakespeare plays, they offer something cultural, something artistic. They hold together in a coherency, but at the same time, all those many little things are there. Now, we're not saying that Shakespeare was a mystic. There's plenty of evidence to indicate that he at least knew about mysticism. And we're not using Shakespeare to give credence to mysticism, because mysticism can stand very well in its view of reality without having to be supported by Shakespeare or anyone else. We're not using Shakespeare for the prestigious association, because that's just so much vanity, and that puts a barrier between ourselves and reality. And so again, we'll try to be very careful about differentiating what is Shakespeare and what is mysticism, and what is both and what could be both. Now we're in our third theme and our third series of plays. We've undergone a big evolution, and I think we've grown up a little bit. The first theme and series was intended to relate our lives with the life of the earth and with the cycle in the universal spirit. And that cycle was called, or that series was called The Cycles of Christ and Persephone. It discussed the breathing of vital life into and out of the earth as etheric vitality comes out of the earth in spring and summer and withdraws back in within fall and winter. The cycle of the seasons. We call that the cycle of Persephone, from the myth of Demeter and Persephone, which is what the ancient Eleusinian mysteries of Greece used to align themselves with the cycle of nature. We also discussed the parallel but asynchronous cycle of the life spirit, which is called intellect by the Platonists, or the Buddhic plane in the Orient, and how it draws into the earth. We call this the cycle of Christ. That's using the modern Western name, because that is the being that is the focus of life spirit. We studied these two cycles, which are phased off by 180 degrees, such that when everything is alive and vital, the spiritual energies are at their lowest. Whereas when things are cold and dead and drear, the spiritual things are the strongest. We looked at the winter's tale for a winter solstice or Christmas story, and we looked at Julius Caesar for a spring equinox or Easter story, and we looked at Midsummer Night's Dream for summer solstice or for St. John's Mess. And finally, for the autumnal equinox or the Immaculate Conception or the Last Judgment, however you want to call it, we looked at Hamlet. It took us a couple of years, I think. We go very, very slowly. The second theme and series was intended, though it was not too successful in that intent, of getting us to look at our creative abilities, our abilities to create, transform, metamorphize, and dissolve with the stuff of the cosmos. We looked at some of the pitfalls of that activity when we looked at black magic, and we looked at the play Macbeth. And we looked at the subject in a much more broad way when we studied The Tempest. And we saw The Tempest as an evolution of consciousness, of all of us as becoming magicians, or of all of us as becoming creators. So that series was called Magic Black and White. Now the third theme, the theme that we are in now, is called Love and the Law. And the intent is to study karma, or cause and consequence, or action and reaction, or destiny, or kismet, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, in relation to grace. The grace that the law serves. And trying to follow the lead of the great spiritual teachers in this, who have unanimously stressed love and ethics and morality over things like science or philosophy or spiritual powers. Because they realize that is where we lag most in our development in moral and ethical character. And we're trying to look at cause and consequence in the way that I've never encountered it before. Because I always have to do something different. Whether it's good or not, it's always something different. And what we've been doing is asking questions and conjecturing about the metaphysical basis of cause and consequence. We started by looking at Romeo and Juliet. And with that play, we were looking at polarity. Polarities of light and dark, of positive and negative, of fire and water, of Freemasonry and Catholicism. After we did the running commentary with the play, we examined the polarity of action and reaction, or cause and consequence. And we did that by asking very hard fundamental questions like, how do we know that cause and consequence are connected? Or what does it mean that cause and consequence are connected? Then we moved on to Measure for Measure. We took a very long time in reading that play and the running commentary. And that was because there were so many issues of spiritual ethics and of morality that come up in that play that it was just like a feast. With this, we did a study of the strict, airtight view of law. We looked a little bit at determinism and its implications. And when we came to the theme talk, we discussed the law in a more dynamic sense. We looked at ongoing destiny, something like a stream of connected cause and consequences. And we tried to look at it as a stream in time. And we asked very fundamental questions like, when does a cause become a consequence? And what does it mean that a cause becomes a consequence at that time? Last spring, we finished the third play in the series, King Lear. We took almost as long with that play because of all the character growth that takes place. Probably there's no play where so many characters grow so much as in King Lear. And when we came to the theme talk, we did something a little different than what we have been doing. And I'm starting to think in Spanish. I'm cramming Spanish because I'm trying to go to South America, and I find myself structuring sentences now like they would be structured in Spanish, and I have to catch myself because it's not the way people think in English. We looked at individual and cosmic cycles of cause and consequence. And to do that, we took a brief look at linear time, cyclical time, titanic time, and momental time. We tried to get a sense of the wheel of destiny or of the wheel of rebirth and all of the other moments and how they fit into those cycles. And again, we tried to ask very hard questions, almost seemingly absurd questions, like, where does a cause become a consequence? At what place does that happen? So we've gone through 67 talks on mysticism and Shakespeare. I'm just astounded by it. And we're beginning the last play of this series. And it's probably going to be the last play altogether. There are chunks of other plays that I would like to address. And there are astrological character studies that I would like to do. And little mysteries vignettes that I would like to do. And it would be a lot of fun to do them. But I can't think of a reasonable way to do them without having something that's jumbled and discontinuous. So I think we're going to finish with this play, and then next fall, probably for the rest of my days, I want to talk directly on pure mysticism and go at it very slowly. And I'm even thinking of working year-round and just taking breaks every now and then of a month or something like that, and just go summer and winter all the time. The play that we're studying now is The Merchant of Venice. Now, the way we do this for the new people in the class is we take turns reading each speech sequentially. So sometime you might be reading a male's part, sometime you might be reading a female's part, and we found out this works about the best after a few years of playing around, and sometimes it takes some very amusing twists. Because on one night, this is the mathematical things that happen. On one night, one person will get all the big, long speeches, or someone will get all the difficult ones. There will be something ironic about it all altogether. As we come to the end of each scene, we stop. And in the break, there's running commentary on the scene that's just been completed. The commentary is sometimes theme-oriented, but it's likely to be about anything. And the running commentary amounts to intuitive mystical free association. Yeah. It's a fun way. This year, things, as far as the organization of the talks are concerned, it's going to be a little different. There's likely to be a huge break all the way from December until March. I'm hoping to be trekking around South America, avoiding bus plunges if possible.
To avoid getting kidnapped.
And avoid getting kidnapped. That happens in Venezuela. That's the one country that I'm not going to. Venezuela is a hotbed of kidnapping right now. But Colombia is, but I got protection there. And because of that, we're probably not going to finish the reading until sometime next spring, and that won't be enough time to begin another play. Instead, what there might be will be extra theme talks, because the subject of grace and the subject of forgiveness is a very, very important one, especially in our current stage of consciousness, where we're trying to get away from legalistic kinds of thinking. If there is some time left over, what we may do is read some sonnets or read one of the long poems and do some commentary on that. So beginning next fall, we'll start all year round with breaks here and there, and I guess we're ready to go. Everybody's got a book. I have to warn you, after having not talked since last spring, or not talked much since last spring, I'm all enthused, and it may get a little windy tonight. All right. I'll start it out and pass it to Jerry. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. But how I caught it, found it, or came by it, what stuff 'tis made of, whereof it is born, I am to learn. And such a want-wit sadness makes of me that I have much ado to know myself.
Your mind is tossing on the ocean. There were the argosies with portly sail, like signars and rich girders on the flood, or as it were, pageants on the sea, to overpeer the petty traffickers that courtesy to them, do them reverence as they fly by them with their woven wings.
Believe me, sir, had I such venture forth, the better part of my affections would be with my hopes abroad. I should be still, plucking the grass to know where sits the wind, peering in maps, ports and piers and roads, and every object that might make me fear misfortune to my ventures, out of doubt would make me sad.
My wind cooling my broth would blow me to an ache when I thought what harm a wind too great might do at sea. I should not see the sandy hourglass run, but I should think of shallow and of flats, and see my wealthy Andrew docked and sink, wailing her high top lower than her ribs to kiss her burial. Should I go to church and see the holy edifice of stone, and not bethink me straight of dangerous rocks which touching but my gentle vessel's side would scatter all her spices on the stream, and rob the roaring waters with my silks, and in a word, but even now worth this, and now worth nothing. Shall I have the thought to think on this? And shall I let thought that such a thing bechance would make me sad? But tell me not. I know Antonio is set to think upon his merchandise.
Believe me, no. I thank my fortune for it. My ventures are not in one bottom trusted, nor to one place, nor is my whole estate upon the fortune of this present year. Therefore my merchandise makes me not sad.
Why, then, you are in love. Fie, fie.
Not in love.
Was that in Spanish or?
Not in love, neither. Then let us say you are sad because you are not merry, and 'twere as easy for you to laugh and leap, and say you are merry because you are not sad. Now by two-headed Janus, nature hath framed strange fellows in her time, some that will evermore peep through their eyes and laugh like parrots at a bagpiper, and other of such vinegar aspect that they'll not show their teeth in the way of smile, though Nestor swear the jest be laughable. Here comes Bassanio, your most noble kinsman, Graziano and Lorenzo. Fare you well. We leave you now with better company.
I would have stayed till I had made you merry, if worthier friends had not prevented me.
Your worth is very dear in my regard. I take it your own business calls on you, and you embrace the occasion to depart.
Good morrow, my good lords.
Good signors both. When shall we laugh? Say when. You grow exceeding strange. Must it be so?
We'll make our leisure to attend on yours.
My lord Bassanio, since you have found Antonio, we too will leave you. But at dinner time, I pray you have in mind where we must meet.
I will not tell you.
You look not well, Signor Antonio. There is too much respect upon the world. They lose it that do buy it with much care. Believe me, you are marvelously changed.
I hold the world but as the world, Graziano, a stage where every man must play a part, and mine a second.
Let me play the fool. With mirth and laughter let old wrinkles come, and let my liver rather heat with wine than my heart cool with mortifying groans. Why should a man whose blood is warm within sit like his grandsire, cut in alabaster, sleep when he wakes, and creep into the jaundice by being peevish? I tell thee what, Antonio, I love thee, and 'tis my love that speaks. There are a sort of men whose visages do cream and mantle like a standing pond, and do a wilful stillness entertain, with purpose to be dressed in an opinion of wisdom, gravity, profound conceit, as who should say, I am Sir Oracle, and when I ope my lips, let no dog bark. For my Antonio, I do know of these that therefore only are reputed wise for saying nothing, when I am very sure, if they should speak, would almost damn those ears, which hearing them would call their brothers fools. I'll tell thee more of this another time. But fish not with this melancholy bait, for this fool gudgeon, this opinion. Come, good Lorenzo, fare you well a while. I'll end my exhortation after dinner.
Well, we will leave you then till dinner time. I must be one of these same dumb wise men, for Graziano never lets me speak.
Well, keep me company but 2 years mo. Thou shalt not know the sound of thy own tongue.
Fare you well. I'll grow a talker for this year.
Thanks and faith, for silence is only commendable in a neat's tongue dried and a maid not bendable.
Is that anything now?
Graziano speaks in an infinite deal of nothing, more than a man in all Venice. His reasons are as 2 grains of wheat hidden in 2 bushels of chaff. You shall see all they are. There you find them, and when you have them, they are not worth the search.
Well, tell me now, what lady is the same to whom you swore a secret pilgrimage that you today promised to tell me of?
It's not unknown to you, Antonio, how much I have disabled my estate by something showing a more swelling forth than my faint means with grand continuance. Nor do I now yet mourn to be wretched from such a noble rape, but my chief care is to come fairly off from the great depths wherein my time something too prodigal hath left me again. To you, Antonio, I owe the most in money and in love. And from your love I have a warranty to unburden all my plots and purposes. How to get clear of all the debts I owe?
I pray you, good Bassanio, let me know it, and if it stand as you yourself still do, within the eye of honor, be assured, my purse, my person, my extremest means lie all unlocked to your occasions.
In my school days, when I had lost one shaft, I shot his fellow of the self-same flight, the self-same way, with more advised watch, to find the other fourth. And by adventuring both, I oft found both. I urge this childhood proof, because what follows is pure innocence. I owe you much, and like a willful youth, that which I owe is lost. But if you please to shoot another arrow that self-way, which you did shoot the first, I do not doubt, as I will watch the aim, or to find both, or bring your ladder hazard back again, and thankfully rest better for the first.
You know me well, and herein spend but time to wind about my love with circumstance, and out of doubt you do me now more wrong in making question of my uttermost, than if you had made waste of all I had. Then do but say to me what I should do, that in your knowledge may by me be done, and I am pressed unto it. Therefore speak.
In Belmont is a lady richly lent, and she is fair, and fairer than that word of wondrous virtues. Sometimes from her eyes I did receive fair speechless messages. Her name is Portia, nothing undervalued to Cato's daughter, Brutus Portia. Nor is the wide world ignorant of her worth, for the four winds blowing from every coast, renowned suitors, and her sunny locks hang on her temples like a golden fleece, which makes the seat of Belmont Colchos strong, and many Jasons come in quest of her. O my Antonia, had I but the means to hold a rival place with one of them, I have a mind presages me such thrift, that I should questionless be fortunate.
Thou knowest that all my fortunes are at sea, neither have I money, nor commodity, to raise a present sum. Therefore go forth, try what my credit can in Venice do. That shall be racked even to the uttermost, to furnish thee to Belmont, so to fair Portia. Go presently, inquire, and so will I, where money is, and I no question make to have it of my trust or for my sake.
Well, it's time for the pillow concessionaire to go into gear. I have the sole concession on pillows for your bottoms. In some ways, this is a very typical opening scene for Shakespeare, in that it tries to give as much background and as much basis to the story as it is possible to do, so that the audience doesn't have to wait to get captivated. You want to get your audience right away. And he usually does that in opening scenes, gives you the picture of things so that you know what's going on, and that has you taken in right away. But this opening scene is not typical in other ways. In fact, it's quite a remarkable opening scene, maybe the most remarkable of any that we've looked at in all the plays. And it's remarkable in several ways, all of which we're going to discuss. First of all, it really describes the general character of several of the roles very well, very briefly, and very clearly. And the first is, of course, Antonio, the merchant of Venice. Now, it's clear that he is serious and cautious and materialistically realistic, and he's worldly wise. If you look at the lines between 77 and 80, he says so himself. But in the opening speech by Antonio, despite its somewhat archaic language, the material is very modern. It's almost a classic description of a deep stage of depression. the kind of depression that is prevalent in our society today. One of the difficulties about depression is that when one is in a depressed state, it's hard to understand the cause, just exactly as it is for Antonio. I have a book about depression and suicide where people describe their being in depression, and they're much more wordy, but it's just exactly as Antonio described it. So Shakespeare knew really well what he was talking about. So no matter what Antonio's friends suggest as causes, he says no because he knows better. Now this allows us to address the subject of depression again, and we haven't much discussed it since we looked at the character of Hamlet several years ago. Now this is in many ways a different kind of depressive character than the character of Hamlet. One of the reasons Hamlet was depressed was because he had that very cold, clear, incisive mind. The mind that mysticism tells us was created by the powers who brought their dark, selfish ways into it. And when the mind is way ahead of the heart, one of the things that happens is that the mind, with its dark nature or its created nature, sees things in a dark way without having the warmer heart feelings to go with it. Hamlet describes this as what he calls sicklying thought, that it sicklies the will or the determination of the individual. Now Hamlet is complex, and he's pensive, and he has a myriad of thoughts about things. He's restive. He just can't sit still. He's bothered in that way. Antonio is calm. In fact, he's so calm that to himself and those around him, he seems stunned. Stunned the way depressives experience depression. Some become so depressed and get into a depressive malaise so badly that they don't even care about the cause of it. Some don't even think about the end of it. It's just like they're in some kind of eternal Ethiopian darkness or something like that. So they just get debilitated in this kind of a funk. I have friends, we all have friends that have that. The primary ruler of depression is Saturn. All of the words that describe Antonio are astrological keywords for Saturn. Serious, cautious, materialistic, realistic, worldly wise. However, there is one Saturnian word that is missing, and it's missing in the same way as the cause of Antonio's depression is missing, and that is ignorance. In our now early state of self-consciousness, in our spiritual evolution, we're limited. Saturn rules limitation. And in our limitation, we can't do everything. Actually, in this world as it is now, it is better not to even try to do everything. So specialization, which is another Saturn keyword, is rewarded with success, just as Antonio has that kind of success. Now, during our evolution on Earth, in the past 3,000 years, we have made a special effort to ignore not only generalism, but spirituality. To some extent, this lies as a natural final consequence of our too deep of a fall into matter over millions of years, and to some extent, it is urged by the divine hierarchies that help us in our evolution. It sort of works by the folk statement, make hay while the sun shines. This material world isn't always going to be here. And the limitations of this material world are very valuable and important to us as we are now. So it's to our evolutionary advantage to gain as much as we can of the objectivity that comes from this limited kind of concentrated view of things. We want to become crystal clear in our objectivity. Again, that kind of objectivity and crystal clearness are both keywords of Saturn. Like Antonio, we have all been successful and we have been rewarded. Our knowledge of the world and how we use that knowledge to our benefit has grown, and it seems to grow now exponentially, the amount of knowledge. You can't keep up with all of the new things that are being learned and all of the things that can be done with them. However, our success has come at a price, and that is a very painful price. And the highest cost has been due to the very ignorance that facilitated the success. It is the intentional ignoring of our spiritual nature that is responsible for the pandemic depression in our society. The more we have ignored our spirituality and our inwardness and intentionally focused outward into matter, the more materially successful we have become. And it's just what you'd expect. Where you put your special efforts is where you get your special rewards. The people that have not done this do not have the same material success. But on the other hand, they don't have the depression either. And when we say this, we're not referring to religion. We're referring to spirituality. Because religion itself has become materialistic or hyper-formal. And it adheres to the materialistic doctrine. Our natural state of being is spiritual. And with this being so, it requires a very unnatural and substantial effort to ignore our basic spiritual nature and to focus exclusively on dense matter. The effort that it takes is not like the effort of a jerk when you're lifting a weight. Instead, it's something more like an overweening application of spiritual self, something that subtends the entire personality that is holding it in this focus for centuries, if not for millennia. And it is this overweening concentrated application or application of concentration that produces the attitude that condenses and pervades our character. It is this heavy holding of our consciousness in this way, which is unnatural to our being, that really is what is the substance of the stunned, Saturnine kind of consciousness that we have in depression. Now, if there's something like a sinkhole in the earth, we call that a depression. And wherever there is a depression, there is a deepening. Saturn rules depth just as it rules depression. And so the answer to the dilemma is also found in the cause of the dilemma. If we are depressed, it means we must go deeper. But the depth that is required is not to go deeper into material existence, but it is a spiritual depth that we're looking for. A spiritual depth that gets beyond and behind the overweening control and focus that has us bound in materialism. So we have to get deep beyond that, and nothing else will satisfy it. So depression asks us to go deeper. Antonio, just like all people in the material world, whether it's the lost word of masonry or whether it's the lost key of music, it's all of that inward knowledge that we had intuitively at one time, and even insight, has been lost to us. We know there's something missing, and Antonio doesn't know exactly what it is that's missing. He's lost touch with spiritual reality, as many of us have lost touch with spiritual reality. A lot of people, fine people, have lost touch with the deeper purpose for existence. There may be a specific reason for his depth-demanding depression. There usually is a specific reason, but what we've been talking about is a general reason. But we can see that his worldly-wise nature is the source of his character that is likely to depression. So he's a perfect example of the general cause of depression. Now it's interesting to note in this that this knowledge has been around for a long time, but it's completely ignored. For example, in the Middle Ages and even in earlier times, the earth element, which is ruled by Saturn, has always been associated with a melancholic temperament. And so the information has been right around us, but most people have just sort of forgotten it. Now, Antonio is not so seriously depressed that he's pathological or non-functional. When we looked at Hamlet, we saw he was on the edge. He could go either way. In fact, some portrayals of Hamlet are portrayals of a crazy man. As we see, Antonio can take care of his affairs quite well. And even in this scene, we see that he's not so selfishly materialistic, that he's afraid to be open-handed with Bassanio. He opens up his purse readily to Bassanio. Now actually, the depression of Antonio is not a major matter in this play, but it does give us the opportunity to have an ongoing development of the way we look at depression. If we look at some of the other characters, Salario and Salanio are not major characters in the play, nor are they highly developed in this scene. But they're developed well enough so that they represent the commonplace people in the world. You might call them Antonio wannabes. And Salanio says as much, that he'd like to be like Antonio. So they're Antonios in the making. That is, if they had that kind of great pervasive concentration or ignorance that he most certainly has. As it is, there are like a lot of commonplace people in the world who are materialistic, but not so much so as to become fully depressed. They're worrywarts. They're Saturnian worrywarts, and they fidget about this and that, and they don't get to the big picture. They fuss over possible negatives, and they have shallow, very worldly notions about the relationship of love and sadness. Now there's this character, Gratanio, who is quite another matter altogether. he's quite clearly defined in just a very few speeches, and not for his verbosity, but he's defined as another kind of a character. He's a good time guy. A good time Charlie, as they used to call him back in the Depression. Gratiano is a man of desire. It's not that he desires things, because that isn't a real man of desire. It is that he revels in the experience of desire and emotion. He loves the fun. He loves the excitement. He loves the good times that one has in desire. Now, mystics of all times and all places have found that the world of desire is another world. It's another realm that is not subject to the laws of the physical world. It has its own laws, laws of feeling and emotion. We all have auric desire bodies, which some choose to call an astral body, and that is what corresponds us in the same way that our physical body allows us to function and relate to the physical world. Since it's another world altogether, it can't be detected by physical machines, because it just doesn't respond to those kinds of laws. So if somebody tells you they've got aura glasses or they've got an aura reading machine, it's bunk. They may be picking something off of the etheric aura, but they're not really at the desire world aura. The only way you can get at that is to develop the eye of feeling, to develop the sensitivity, to develop the sympathy, and to develop a keen relationship with emotion and feeling. Now, some people have done that. They've cultivated their desire natures through art or other ways of development, and those people have developed desire bodies of what we would call the higher kinds of desires, the finer emotions. Such people know that you can live in a world of emotions, and you can live in that world of feelings, and it's a place unto itself. You don't even have to relate to this world at all. All of us has probably experienced that from time to time, especially if we listen to music. We can enter into our feelings so deeply that we lose touch with the physical, and that we're living in a world where things make sense, but they don't make sense the way objects do in this world. It's a different kind of sense that they make. However, not all of our desires are lofty, and some are quite base, and we're indulgent about them, even the destructive ones. We know that from the emotion of anger. Now, the desire world and the desire bodies are not intended to be apart from this world by themselves. It's all right occasionally to take a vacation or to resort to them as a place of repose, but just as there is the danger of focusing too much in matter, the danger that Antonio is tiptoeing on the edge of, there is also the danger of spending or focusing too much attention in the desire world. The chief function of the desire body is to provide motivation. Motivation to act and to do and to experience things in this world. It also gives emotional feelings about things that correspond to things in the inner world. But what has happened is we have given too much free rein to our desire nature. and it has resulted in a tremendous amount of pain. This has gone so far that the instinctual self-preservational focus built into the desire body, that was built into it to protect us until the spirit could completely indraw and take care of things itself, has taken power unto itself. It has usurped its position, and it's become a tyrannical, self-indulgent pseudo-ego. In fact, most people think that's their real nature, the pseudo-ego. And it's set up its own rule. And that rule is not always harmonious with the higher will, with the spiritual being. Consequently, we find ourselves in the inner kind of struggle that we have. The desire body usually motivates the physical and etheric body by a resonant kind of impingement. Since there is not a direct connection, what it does is it surrounds it, it overshadows it, and by a resonant frequency is how it activates the physical etheric. Over a long period of evolution, the desire body has become quite close to the physical. It's become closely associated with it. For example, if we follow to certain kinds of sweeps of desire in our aura for a long, long time, they eventually become the stuff of muscles in our body. The dense body the desire body is itself very nascent and primitive in its development. It's only been in evolution for a very short time, since we were animal-like in the last stage of evolution. So it's relatively young in its development. It's very fluidic, because it's much closer to the spirit, and it's an ovid or ovid that is emotional and desireful, and there's all kinds of rapid flow and movement in it. Even if we develop complexes and desire something so much that it gets congealed in certain places and takes on complex forms. The desire body is so young that there are no organs in it, as there are in the physical body and the etheric body. So the desire stuff is constantly in rapid motion, and it's alive with emotional tone color, but within it there are vortices. The desire stuff flows outward from an inner dimension, and it goes instantly all over the desire nature, and then it comes back in through these vortices. The vortices, one is located at the center of the forehead, one at the back nape of the neck, one at the voice box, one at the genitals, one at each knee, and the primary vortex is in the liver. That is where the desire stuff outwells. It isn't actually part of the physical liver, because it's not part of this physical world, but it is suspended in space in that area around the liver of the physical body. Seers of all types, even the most primitive seers, if you go to places where people still live in rainforests in great primitivity, they will say that the seat of liveliness is in the liver. And there are some tribes where they say, I love you from the bottom of my liver. That happens with me, but I mean something quite different when that occurs. All right. Now, because the desire nature has almost become a being unto itself, it indulges in itself, and it revels in itself. And in this reveling in desire, it participates in a war. But there are two wars at least going on. The normal war that we think of is the war between the lower pseudo-ego and the true spiritual self, which some call the higher self. But the war we're talking about now is a struggle between the desire body and the etheric vital body. And it is in this struggle that we get all of our consciousness. It's a huge subject. It's worth a whole series of lectures, and I think someday I will do that. It will be part of the year-round business if I get to do that. The battleground of this other war is the dense physical body, because that's where we wakingly experience things. Now, the etheric body, the vital body, tends to the physical body. It would have the physical body grow and vegetate and at most perceive. It's very happy if somebody is a vegetable, because that's its purpose, is to maintain the physical body. The desire body wants excitement and action at any cost. No matter what the cost, it wants to stimulate. And it stimulates the physical body until the vital body is exhausted and there is not the energetic wherewithal to carry out the desires. And so both vehicles have to withdraw to the inner worlds in what we call sleep, where there can be a restoration of them by the natural harmonies in the macrocosm. The desire body really doesn't care about the physical, at least as things are right now. If the desire body is indulged, it will destroy the physical in its quest for excitement. This is most pronounced in the liver. Alcohol is to the physical and etheric bodies, it's a depressant, it's a sedative. But to the desire body, it's a stimulant, especially the lower desires. I think all of us have experienced at one time or another being under the influence of alcohol and what it does to the desires. They just run wild. Alcohol destroys the liver. It destroys the liver. That is where the blood is, so to speak, heated by desire. Now, this is the case in all warm-blooded animals. In all warm-blooded animals where there is a liver, the blood is driven or the blood is heated and moved by desire at the liver. And descriptions of this you can find in mystical or occult textbooks. And if you look at the lines on page 6, between 81 and 83, they're almost exact references to things that you could find stated in occult textbooks. Makes you wonder about Shakespeare. How, was he? Did he know these things? The entire first speech of Gratiano is a statement of some of the chief points of desire. It doesn't like stagnancy, and it's cocksure of itself, just like he is. All right, this leaves us with one last character that is pretty well developed right from the introduction. And this is, of course, Bassanio. Bassanio is a Jupiterian character, just as Antonio is Saturnian. Bassanio has his own share of jovial indulgence. It isn't quite as desireful. And he openly admits to carelessnesses and wastes and folly. He's undauntedly optimistic and positive about the future. Forget about the past, which is what Saturn would never do. So in this play, we have the astrological opposite of planetary. We have the astrological opposite of planetary opposites that we saw in Antony and Cleopatra when we did that play. Planetary opposites complement each other. The most obvious being Mars and Venus. They need each other, but they are each what they need from each other. Each of the planets is a specialist, or each of the planets is an epitome of a given quality in the organism of the universal spirit. Saturn and Jupiter are the small and the large of things. They are the pessimist and the optimist. They are the contraction and the expansion of things. In Antony and Cleopatra, Mark Antony was an older, proud, great-spirited Jupiter, and he was vulnerable to an up-and-coming, cold and calculating young Augustus Caesar, who was a Saturnian being. In this case, we have an established, serious Saturnian person in Antonio. He's not calculating as Caesar was, but he's still a Saturnian person. And he can't resist the noble but careless and optimistic Jupiter in Bassanio. This is shown if you look at lines 135 and again at 153. You just can't resist them at all. So planetary opposites are like that. They almost have a toe in each other's kingdom, and they can affect each other. In spiritual or astrological psychotherapy, the right tendencies or potentials in planetary opposites are often used to heal afflictions or extremities. So there's like the potentiality of a healing of the depression of Antonio through the agency of the Jupiterian nature of Bassanio. The willingness of Antonio to open his purse to Bassanio is an indicator that his depression is not pathological, so that he's some kind of depressed miser or something like that and won't open up for anything. He's reasonably sane, but depressed. It also shows that he's open to the perfectly expansive Jupiterian person. Now, this difference in outlook brings us as close as we're going to get to the theme for these talks this evening, which means we're going off into another long side trip. I had a ball. I spent hour after hour, and everything was so clear. It was you think about things for a while, and you hold them in your consciousness. I could just sit there, just write like that. I write. I do it to. I print with pencil, and I can just write steady. I do it for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and then I quit, come back to it, and do it for another 2 or 3 hours. That was a wonderful time. I think some of the greatest joys in my life are finalizing and completing my thoughts in producing the notes for these talks. Okay, we're trying to understand destiny. We're trying to understand it, obviously, because our future and what we do in our future to some extent rests on how well we understand destiny and how we can act and live according to our understanding. Now, if we're really honest with ourselves, we have to admit that the future is unknown. And what our destiny will be is also unknown. So we're talking about the unknown and how we approach the unknown. There are different philosophies, and each represents an attitude toward the future and our destiny that we can see around us every day. Each view about the future and about destiny has its weak points and its strong points with regard to the future, and that's what we're most interested in. So we're going to take the Saturnian character and outlook toward destiny of Antonio and the outlook of Bassanio and see how they represent the ones that are coming back to haunt me, and unfold the philosophies about the future or about the unknown or about destiny. Now in this department, Antonio is again careful and successful and thoughtful. He's in a weak position. Now it seems almost absurd to say this, because here he's a vastly successful man, but in a way it's ironic and it's absurd, but he is really in a weak position. After all, the most sensible people we know would follow his lead. Not just because he's successful, as Warren Buffett is said to be successful, but because his outlook is reasonable. It's a very reasonable outlook. But reason is of the past. And we're talking about the future. In our evolution and in our lifetimes, we have developed reason by remembering things from the past and connecting causes and consequences, and thereby developing logic and seeing logical sequences. It almost seems self-evident, since we can see logical and causal connections, that they will continue into the future. They're so clear, they're so obvious, we can see that this was a result of what we did before. Antonio sees the past, and he sees the past extending into the future. What he describes very succinctly and clearly in the speech on page 4 at line 46 is what an investment counselor would call a diversified portfolio. It's exactly, and the wisest investment counselors would do that. It's considered about the most sound procedure when investing in the future, at least when people who look at the past invest in the future. This is just another way that Antonio is conventional and conservative and worldly wise. He's confident in logic, and he's confident in knowledge. When we look at our past, when we look back, and we see how we have gotten to where we are, it's a very persuasive argument for cause and consequence and its continuance. It seems so reasonable that it's a no-brainer to think that it will continue into the future, and that the future is merely a continuation of the past. But there's illusion in this view. The logical and causal connections are indubitable. They're not exclusive, and they're not total. There are a lot of things in our past that we are not cognizant of. Historians go back to the Civil War every few years and find a new set of causes for it. We weren't cognizant of them before, nor were the people living in the Civil War battles cognizant of them. There are things right now that might be important factors in our lives that we're ignorant of or that we don't know about. Of course, most of the future we're not cognizant of. Even things that I thought I knew well beforehand were surprising when they were experienced, when they actually came to be. I thought I knew them. It was just going to be an old hat matter, come into things, and when I did, I was surprised. I was shocked in some cases. So we have a very Saturnian outlook. It's cold. Not that Antonio is necessarily cold, but the outlook is cold. With this view, all actions, all causes are equal in a time that's neutral and a potential that's neutral, merely a place for new causes, any new causes, to fill with consequences. Taken to the extreme, if all causes are equal or if all actions are equal, it's a really grim view of things. That's the way Saturn is. It's the Grim Reaper. Now there are other values and other criteria according to which we can make choices, not just personal advantage. Moreover, it's not clear that time isn't flavor. And it's not clear that the future doesn't have some ideas of its own. It always turns out that way. The historiophiles are always surprised. I'm sure you've seen that box score, where every inning the pessimists chalk up 2 or 3 runs, and the optimists nothing, but when the game is over, it's optimist 1, pessimist nothing. It's something like that. However, to go into the subject of flavored time is much too large for now, because it opens into a way of astrology that's way too big. Even what we're looking at is way too big, but we're going into it anyway. Where we are now, with our thinking, we're approaching the far reaches of reason. And what seems to happen as we approach the far reaches of reason is that logical or paradoxical opposites unite. In this case, the indubitability and the finality of causal connection means that things must change, even though causality might reason that things are going to be changeless and the same causes are going to go on. That's a very ironic, paradoxical thought, but that's true. We are seers of the truth. And we are becoming beings, and we are within this causal network. And we have all seen that it has a trapdoor effect to it. It's like a valve in a pump. The water can't rush back. We can't go back. Once we have experienced something and have come to knowledge of it, we can't go back. We're changed forever. And anything that we experience is changed forever. If we have freedom, we can't lie to ourselves and say that freedom doesn't exist. So things are changed, and we are changed, meaning we can't go back to things as they were in the stream of causes and consequences, and that the future certainly must be changed. Whether we know it or not, or whether causality holds or not, the idea of looking at the past has a trapdoor in it so that we can't get stuck and believe that everything can be known from the past. Now, if we look at Antonio and the way he looks at the past, we have some security within some relative range of time. We know that it's very likely that the sun's going to come up tomorrow and that the trapdoor effect isn't that big. But we never know whether at some time or another we come to a bigger change in understanding that the sun might not come up tomorrow. But it's basic. But if we base our lives on something like viewing our destiny as a historical reenactment, it's not alive. It has fantasy about it. It's just not a reality. It's like daydreaming. So it's no wonder that people who have this deterministic, materialistic state find depression as a bed partner. Now there is another deeper level to this that is surprisingly paradoxical, but it's inappropriate for now. We'll have to wait till some other talk because it would take too long to bring it out. And I think that's one of the things that may come out next spring.
Stay tuned.
I gotta hook you in somewhere. I'm going to be standing talking to myself.
I have a slogan.
What?
Is there a pithy phrase?
Yeah, we can put a little flag in it.
Yeah,
You know what flag
time and.
you know.
Just remind me of historical reenactments.
You will have been changed by then.
Bassanio has a very different outlook. Like many Jupiterian people, he realizes that there are things beyond his ken. But he trusts in his optimism in the goodness of them. They're greater, so they must be better, is the way he looks at things. He trusts in goodness, and he participates in it. He's not like Gratiano, who just wants the desire. He has fun, but he's noble. So like a higher kind of Jupiter versus a lower kind of Jupiter. He probably believes in luck, or at least that a positive attitude is conducive to good things or seeing good things when they could be. He even believes that a rich, good-looking woman wants to marry him. Now, that's optimism. That's real. Despite all of his seriousness, you can see why Antonio loves him. It's hard not to love somebody that's that positive. He's wide open. Antonio loves him so much that he's willing to suspend judgment. And he even suspends judgment on that very questionable theory that Bassanio brings out. You know, at the speech on line 140.
The arrow?
Yes, with the arrow. A Saturnian figure like Antonio would say, normally say, if he saw Bassanio coming down the street, he would say, once burned, twice learned. And he wouldn't go into it again. And he would laugh at the argument of one arrow following the other. A Saturnian person normally would say that's throwing good money after bad, because he doesn't have a good track record. That's what, people who look from the past look at the track record. Now this argument really is a bad argument. The generalists, some Jupiterian generalists sometimes don't differentiate between generality and abstract reason. They're good at both, but they sometimes just slide over things with broad generalities that sound good, and they seem to mimic reason. I don't know if you've ever shot bows and arrows, but even if you try to shoot every kid has done it, you try to shoot an arrow straight up in the air, and as straight as you try to get it, when it comes down, it's a long way off. And if you were shooting at something, that arrow goes a long way away. And then the fallacy of this argument is if you were so observant as you planned to be on the second arrow, on the first arrow you never would have lost it in the first place. It's an argument that's filled with holes, but it sounded good, so he went with it.
He pulled on his own opposition there with the childlike innocence.
Yeah. It's not that he doesn't know about logic or causality. It is that he has faith and belief and confidence and a positivity, and that they greatly exceed reason or causality. Therefore, he sometimes loses, but when he loses big, But he figured since the world is a large place, he's going to win big someday. I'm going to hit it, and it's going to be it. So he is the opposite of Antonio. Antonio is under or below the law, and he thinks he's right on. Bassanio is above or beyond the tight strictures of law, and he thinks he's right on. But optimism can be as infectious as panic. To some extent, Antonio has caught it. So he can't say no, which is normally his best word. So he is to Bassanio what Mark Antony was to Caesar, though the results are very different when he gives in. Bassanio is wide open, open enough to open up Antonio, which is exactly what the shelled-in Antonio needs to bring him out of his depression. He needs to be more expectant about the future and less ground under the wheel of fate. Next time we'll try to move along a little bit more swiftly, but in the mood that I'm in these days, it may take a long time to get through the play.
Thank you. Yeah, I was watching from the